In this lecture, I'm going to be looking at some of the concepts drawn from Samkhya, which is the philosophical foundation of the yoga tradition, and it influences Indian tradition generally. And I'm going to pull out some of the concepts, including ideas about states of mind and the gunas. So even though this is a discrete philosophical school, it influences others, and so this is going to bridge us into Ayurveda, which partakes of a lot of the same concepts, and it's very common if somebody's practicing yoga, they may also be going to an Ayurvedic practitioner. So I want to start with the gunas. There's no good English translation for the word, so I'm using qualities of energy, and that's signaling clearly that we're talking about energetic systems, as I talked about when we were looking at the koshas, or the concept of the body within the Hindu tradition, that it's an energetic system. It's not just a material object. And so Samkhya develops the idea that there are the three gunas, and they characterize the phenomenal world. So it's not just the body partakes of it, but so do certain types of food and other aspects of nature. So these are just the kind of fundamental energetic categories. So you have to shift your mind in order to fully understand the way this is looking at the world. As I said, it's an energetic way of understanding the world and the human body. So the first is sattva, and I'll be talking about this in more detail. The second, rajas, and the third, tamas. And so it's understood that these are elements that exist in all people, but certain ones will predominate, and also certain activities will emphasize one of these three energies. So we're looking here at what the Bhagavad Gita has to say about the gunas, and this follows on the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna regarding what is yoga and what's a yogi. And so this is what the Bhagavad Gita has to say. Sattva, or goodness, rajas, or activity, and tamas, or inertia. These three gunas of mind bind the imperishable soul to the body, O Arjuna. So the idea that each human soul partakes of different elements of either goodness, activity, and inertia. And of these, sattva, being calm, is illuminating and ethical. It fetters the embodied being, the jiv, atma, or purusha, by attachment to happiness and knowledge, O Arjuna. So this is interesting. So sattva, and you'll often hear this said, there's certain types of food that are sattvic. So they're more amenable to a spiritual life. And so generally, in most of these systems, you're trying to emphasize sattva. However, as we can see within this dialogue, even sattva can cause a kind of attachment, because it's still an energy. You can become attached to sattva, and it's often said that, and probably some of you know people like this, people that are very proud of themselves for being so sattvic, for eating so cleanly. The clean diet people can be the most full of pride of anybody. So that idea that even this can be subtly unspiritual, but nonetheless, of the three, you're aiming towards sattva because it has the highest level of energy. The dialogue goes on. Arjuna, know that rajas is characterized by intensity and is born of desire and attachment. It binds the jiva by attachment to the fruits of work. And so this will be becoming more concretely understandable as we move along. I'm going to be asking you to do a quiz that looks at which of these elements is predominant in you. And so it's important to note, okay, so that this attaches the jiva. So jiva is another word for Atman, or soul. And so when rajas is present, we find intensity of energy and attachment to the fruits of work. And so I'll just give an example, even at this point, that if somebody is predominantly rajas, they'll often have a sort of driving ambition in life. That's their kind of main energy in life, is this often a drive for success in career, for instance. Know, O Arjuna, that tamas, the deluder of jiva, is born of inertia. It binds by ignorance, laziness, and sleep. And so tamas is the heaviest, it's the most material. Now, it's important to note that this is a subtle philosophy. And so if somebody's a householder, they're going to need all of these. We have to have some tamas, because some tamas is necessary for sleep. and also for sometimes for recovery. And also rajas is necessary in terms of activity, and particularly in certain jobs. So I've talked about this actually with people that teach yoga, and they'll say that they found that once they started teaching, for instance, they needed more rajas. And so, for instance, maybe they started drinking more coffee than they normally would have. So this idea that depending on what you do in life, you also need these you need these energies in different kind of gradients. Goes on. Arjuna, Sattva attaches one to happiness, Rajas to action, and Tamas to ignorance by covering knowledge. So again, that idea that even though Sattva is a higher energy, it still is a form of attachment, even if it's to goodness or to happiness. That's still a form of attachment. Sattva dominates by suppressing Rajas and Tamas. Rajas dominates by suppressing Sattva and Tamas dominates by suppressing Sattva and Rajas, O Arjuna. When the lamp of knowledge shines through all the 9 gates of the body, then it should be known that sattva is predominant. So this idea that certain energies can be in the ascendant, and also there's a concept within Samkhya that certain times of the day, so noon time is the time of Rajas, the sun's at its zenith. So nature itself partakes of these energies, and nighttime is the time of sleep, of time of inertia and tamas. And so we see at the end here, even though a person can become attached to sattva, it's still the first step is to maximize sattva, because in a sattvic state, our consciousness is able to move itself towards enlightenment. Gita goes on to look at what this looks like in action. So greed, activity, restlessness, passion, and undertaking of selfish works when Rajas is predominant, O Arjuna. So these are the characteristics of Rajas. Ignorance, inactivity, carelessness, and delusion arise when Tamas is predominant, O Arjuna. So these energies have these qualities to them, and then if it's a person enacting them, these activities are going to look a certain way. So somebody who's ruled by Rajas, and we're going to look at this in Ayurveda, has a very certain personality type. Somebody who's ruled by more Tamas will have another type of personality. Now this can shift. And part of what Ayurveda does is work with these energies and, for instance, breaking up tamas. So actually, in some cases, you need rajas to come in and break up the tamas. So just for instance, if somebody's in a state of feeling low energy, depressed, and so on, a yoga teacher might say you need to do a series of very active sun salutation to just get energy moving. So this is a very nuanced system, the way it's working with these energies. So from within the understanding of Samkhya Yoga philosophy, the body partakes of these 3 energies, but also the mind partakes of them. So on this slide, these are what are often referred to as the 5 habitual states of mind. And I find this a very interesting model of the mind emerging out of this philosophical school. And it's been interesting to see in the last 20 or 30 years the way yoga has come into conversation with Western psychology, because really there's not a lot of vocabulary for states of mind in Western psychology. And so this offers a way of looking at clearer and less clear states of mind. So I'm going to work through these, pulling it out of The Gift of Consciousness by Gita Beshkard. So Kshipta is the impulsive, restless state of mind. And so these first 2, Kshipta and Muda, are considered inappropriate if somebody wants to start working with yoga, that it's almost impossible to really practice yoga if your mind is habitually in these states. So Kshipta is highly rajasic. It's impulsive. It's somebody who's not able to, for instance, delay gratification. Muda is the dull mind. It's recognized as being conditioned by tamas. So kshipta is more rajasic, muda is more tamasic, and so devoid of discrimination and clarity. In this condition, the individual is primarily concerned with mundane matters related to the lower mind and worldly acquisitions. So I always find this interesting when I read this, because I mean, this from the point of view of the secular world, this is sort of where people's minds are expected to be. This is sort of somebody who's just completely in the mundane realm. So from a yoga point of view, this is a very unconscious mind, and so it's ruled by tamas. There's no clarity, and so this makes it very difficult to do certain types of spiritual practice. The third is vikshipta, or changeable. So this is the mixed mind, and this tends to be the most common, where sometimes the mind can focus, sometimes it's clear, sometimes it goes into these other states. So it's fluctuating, it's changeable. So there are points at which it is able to discriminate and to contemplate, but it can be easily distracted. So vikshipta encompasses many degrees of concentration and calmness. And so this is a state of mind that has potential, according to the yogic tradition, to develop itself, because it does have these moments of clarity, these moments of concentration. And I'm sure you all know from your own experience, you can train your mind. I'm sure you've noticed it from even a year in university, the difference in your level of concentration and ability to concentrate. Mind's extremely plastic, as we know from psychological research. So this is definitely part of yogic thinking, that you can work with your mind and develop it. So akagram is then the next step, the one-pointed mind. And so through the yamas, the niyamas, these meditative practices, slowly the person is moving towards what's referred to as the one-pointed mind. So absorbed in a single focus. And so this state of mind allows for clarity of vision. So this is a very high level of consciousness. And if we talk about those meditative states, we're moving into dharana and even into jhana at this point. And then the final one is nirodha. And so I just want to be clear here. These states of mind, and we're going to be seeing this also in Buddhism, that these are states of mind that the average person never experiences. So I have to be I'm reading from scripture. I don't actually know this experience, but this is the point where all fluctuations of the mind are controlled. So if we look at that first sutra, the first Yoga Sutra about stopping the fluctuations of the mind, at this point, you've achieved the goal of doing that, and so you've reached enlightenment or samadhi. So that this again, as I mentioned earlier, is considered to be very challenging and can take lifetimes to achieve, according to the Hindu tradition.